Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. So I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is an integral supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including Tableau, HPE Vertica, TidalScale, Dell Statistica, and IBM, to name just a few. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. So today's webinar is entitled, Creating Efficient Ways to Connect Across Disparate Data Sources. And before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. So today's event will be an hour long. We have 4 presenters that I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A following the presentation. And this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. So I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Trayson Marks of Knight Transportation, Miguel Martinez of Microsoft, Amelia Glum and Dan Gananchel of Alteryx. Now, Trayson graduated from the University of Central Oklahoma in 2011 with a degree in economics. Since then, he's held positions at several different transportation companies, developing and maintaining metrics within operations in the transportation industry. You know, at Knight Transportation, he leads the team that's implementing Alteryx and Power BI to create solutions at all levels of his company. Now, Miguel Martinez is a senior product manager for Microsoft Power BI. He oversees the digital strategy for cloud business intelligence solutions, and his background includes formal training and practical experience in marketing and engineering. Amelia Glum has been a solution engineer at Alteryx for over a year. Prior to working at Alteryx, she worked at an early-stage startup focused on leveraging big data to deliver targeted and personalized marketing campaigns, as well as at a company specializing in cloud data storage and task management. Now, Dan Gananchel is a product and alliance marketing manager at Alteryx. Dan currently focuses on partner marketing efforts with technology partners, including Microsoft, and he's held several roles in his career where he's produced strong record in driving both customer and revenue growth. Well, thanks everyone for being with us. We're looking forward to your presentation. You know, many companies around the world face a number of challenges when it comes to operations of their business. For example, transportation and logistics companies combat challenges such as moving a diversified portfolio of goods to an ever-expanding marketplace, fluctuating fuel and fleet costs, infrastructure, and the constant consumer expectation to transport items faster. So dealing with these challenges is important and significantly impacts the operations of a company. Data these companies collect can help address the challenges. So the problem is that the data resides in silos across the organizations. Manual manipulation of data is time-consuming, and operational data may reside in separate systems, leading to complex reporting and poor visibility into what's going on in the business. So in today's Data Science Central webinar, we'll learn how Knight Transportation utilizes Alteryx and Microsoft Power BI to overcome data problems and operate more efficiently by removing the frustrations of traditional reporting tools, creating efficient ways to connect across disparate data sources, and generating and sharing more effective insights. Now, before we turn this over to Dan and his associates, Alteryx would like to get an idea of what our audience faces so they can better tailor their presentation to your needs. To do that, we're going to ask our audience to give us some feedback on these 2 polling questions. So here's our first question. If you would please consider, what challenge do you face the most when working with data? Connecting to various data sources, blending data from multiple sources, preparing and cleansing data using cumbersome tools, or visualizing the data into understandable dashboards and reports. Audience, if you would please take just a second and click the one item that most describes your situation. Okay, and let's see what you had to say. All right, so it seems that blending data from multiple data sources is in the lead, and pretty obviously preparing and cleansing tools, data tools with cumbersome tools is your number 2 concern. Let's do one more question. Here's our second question. What tools are you currently using today to work with data? Are you using Alteryx? Are you using Microsoft Power BI? Are you using Microsoft Excel? Or are you using another tool like Tableau, Paxata, Informatica, SAS, or the like? Go ahead and take just a second and tell us what tools you're using. Okay, let's take a look at what you had to say. And okay, so other tools comes in at the lead. Microsoft Excel, not surprisingly, is a close second, but a fair number of you are using Microsoft Power BI and even Alteryx. So Dan, now that we know a little bit more about our audience, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, hi everyone. As mentioned, my name is Dan Gananchel and I am from Alteryx, and I want to thank you for joining our webinar today. Our goal of today's webinar is to show you how you can overcome key challenges when working with data. Specifically, we'll look at addressing challenges to connecting to disparate data sources, and as the polling questions mentioned, we'll definitely touch on how to better blend, or how one would go about blending and preparing that data, as well as generating and sharing more effective insights within your organization. With us today, we have the pleasure of having Knight Transportation on this webinar to share with you how they are creating, driving, and experiencing real business value in regards to working with data. And I'll start off by giving you all a brief synopsis of who Knight is. So on my slide here, I'll just take you through it really quickly. Knight Transportation is a truckload carrier offering dry van, refrigerated, and brokerage services in terms of freight transportation. They're headquartered in the Valley of the Sun, aka Phoenix, Arizona, and the company has nearly 5,000 employees, 4,000 tractors, and over 8,800 trailers. With over 850+ million in revenues, Knight Transportation is definitely continually looking for ways to improve their bottom line. And one way they do this is to utilize data that they have and that they collect to help them improve business operations and ultimately profitability. Now, Knight Transportation relies on data to help them effectively run their operations. And like Knight, I'm sure that many of you today that are attending this webinar use data to fuel your business operations, whether that be sales, marketing, finance, or other functions. Data definitely does fuel many of the insights we use to manage and operate our businesses. So it comes as no surprise that we all know that data can have a very positive impact on our organizations. According to an IDG Enterprise 2016 Data and Analytics Research Report, 78% of enterprises agree that collection and analysis of data has the potential to change the way they do business over the next 1 to 3 years. Yet, the amount of data and the sources of where data comes from starts to proliferate as our appetite for data consumption grows. And this desire for more data, unfortunately, leads to significant challenges. We face various roadblocks when working with data. And so let me just take you through these very quickly as well. The first challenge is that data resides in silos across the organization, as Bill mentioned to begin our webinar today. This causes one of the most common problems we hear from analysts and business users, namely the problem of trying to first find the right data needed for analysis and then combine that data with other data from various sources into one data set, all while trying to do this manually. And I bet anything that most of the audience can relate to this, because as mentioned in the poll question, a lot of you are still using Microsoft Excel. And while Excel is great, and if you love writing formulas, that's awesome, but sometimes it can just be too cumbersome or take too long to do what you needed to do. as I mentioned, manual manipulation of data is time-consuming. So again, think of the more productive and business-important activities you could be accomplishing rather than spending time trying to manually put together data sets for analysis. Furthermore, the same data may reside in separate tools, thus leading to complex reporting and poor visibility into what truly is going on in the business. Having to update data in one tool, right? But then let's say you have that data in another tool and you want to update it in that tool in order to preserve accuracy and consistency in the data in the various tools requires a lot of tedious work, and God forbid you forget, and then now it's messing up your analysis because your data is not matching correctly. Luckily, most organizations have an IT department that can assist, but the need to rely on IT usually becomes expensive and doesn't always result in the most efficient and speediest of operations. Lastly, developing various reports from multiple data sources is complex, thus making it difficult to get a holistic picture of what the data is telling you. So, how do you get past these data roadblocks? Well, we've found that you need to focus on accelerating, transforming, and collaborating in regards to working with your data. To accelerate and get results faster, complexity and manual processes involved in connecting to disparate data sources should be eliminated. Also, reducing the time it takes to connect to and pull in data for your analysis must be a strategic priority. To transform your work with data to gain better line of sight into what your data is telling you and how it can help improve your business or answer strategic questions, utilizing the right set of tools that enable you to quickly perform data preparation, blending, analysis, and visualization should be your focus. And in addition, you'll also want to focus on eliminating data silos to enable quicker and more comprehensive visibility into your data. To work together more effectively when it comes to data analysis, and maybe there's multiple departments that have a stake in a data set that's being used to drive strategic questions and answers. You want to enable your colleagues with the ability to easily share data assets, such as workflows, visualizations, or data sets, with others in your organization. This way, tribal knowledge can be discovered and analyses can be more effectively distributed to generate deeper insights. So, Knight Transportation has accelerated, transformed, and collaborated on the way they work with data by creating more efficient ways to connect across disparate data sources and also by removing the frustrations caused by traditional reporting tools. And by doing this, Knight has empowered their employees to be more productive, which has resulted in improved efficiency in operations. I'd like to introduce all of you today to Trayson Marks. Again, he was introduced at the beginning. He's the Director of Data Analytics at Knight Transportation. And Trey is going to share with us how he's improving business operations at Knight and ultimately transforming the analytics culture at Knight. Great.
Hi, everybody. This is Trayson over at Knight Transportation. I'm going to run you through a few things just to give you an idea of what was going on and how we've kind of pushed past those using tools like Alteryx and Power BI. So early on, about 2 years ago, I started here at Knight Transportation, and the steps that the company had taken before I got here was to move, as we grow as a company, was to move into multiple different operating platforms because of how the new business types we were entering. They couldn't always be managed in the legacy systems that we had been using, which is AS400. So this presented a new problem that we hadn't hit before, in that all of our data sources were now, instead of being in one nice, neat quote-unquote set of data, it is now in multiple places where we have an AS400 DB2 deployment as well as SQL Server, some things on the cloud. And so what we found really quickly is that we needed to figure out a way to grab those data sets in in a manner that is different than what we were doing. Those being pulling AS400 direct reports, using SSRS reports for our SQL Server deployment, and pushing all those to Microsoft Excel and blending them. There are a lot of complications that come with managing your reporting that way. People being one of them. Mistakes can happen, and sometimes they're not always easy to catch. So we had gone through we had started looking at a few different tools, and because we are an O365 shop, Power BI fit really well into our visualization deployment. The problem still there was that we needed a way to better blend our data. So we researched a few different options there, and we found Alteryx, and we noticed, well, when it came in, the challenge would always be, hey, how well does it connect to the AS400? Because it's kind of it's an older system. It's a little older than I am. It has a unique syntax. It's got a lot of security around it, and it has interesting problems with its state forming. One specific example is how it formats its states. So it doesn't always play well with blending with other data sets. Alteryx was able to make that connection to the AS400, as well as SQL Server, some of those cloud data sources that I was talking, as well as make API calls within the same workflow. So we can pull data from our 7 different business units and get a holistic view of our company, which was lost when we had kind of moved over to new platforms. It's important to note that we also use both tools dependently and independently of each other. We realize that not everything needs to go to a visualization, and not every visualization needs to have data blended in front of it. So they both stand well on their own outside of each other. So since the implementation of the two softwares, we've been able to make this connection across disparate data sources a lot easier, and put it in the hands of folks who don't necessarily have a traditional IT training, background training, or an AS400 training, through that we were able to remove the task of report developing off of our expensive AS400 developers, where they could now, instead of creating reports, they were able to get back into the development of our tool. We also created solutions across a bunch of different business units, not just specifically around operations. We are able to kind of create a task force that is able to go in and find the problems and really quickly create insight into whatever those problems are. We always had kind of an analytics focused culture, but now we're seeing that excel through enthusiasm that we've built around these two tools. And it goes all the way to the top. People are seeing how powerful the combo is and are really excited about it. The last and probably most important part about this is that we've been able to create trust in what it is that we're doing. Because it's just super important around creating that culture, because if people don't accept whatever it is that we are pushing, then it makes the whole transition to an analytics-focused culture a lot more difficult. So real quickly, I'm going to pass this over to Amelia, and she's going to do a demonstration of Alteryx and how it works, how you can connect through the tool.
Amelia, you might still be on mute.
Oh, excuse me. I was. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to show you the fundamental building blocks of the Alteryx workflow. Specifically, I'm going to showcase how you can easily and quickly prep and blend your disparate data sources together. At the top here, we have the tool palette. This is where tools are color-coded and divided by their function. Now, after we find the tool we're looking for, we're going to drag and drop it onto the white space here, which is called the canvas. To the left of the canvas is the configuration window. Here we'll configure each tool along the way. And down below is the results window, where we'll be able to preview our data at each point throughout the flow, making it very easy to understand exactly how our data is being transformed step by step. I'm going to begin by bringing an input data tool onto the canvas. This tool allows me to connect to a flat file or to a database. The first input source I'll connect to is indeed a flat file. There are many flat file types we support. Of course, Excel is in this list, as is CSV and Access. For my first use case today, I'm going to bring in a transaction CSV file. And you can see a preview of this data down below. We have a customer identifier as well as information about each transaction. Now, because it's a CSV, all of my data types are currently stored as text. And before I can do any calculations or aggregations on this data, I'll need to update my data types. And I can do this with the Select tool. The Select tool allows me to easily update my data types, like my unit price and quantity. I'll make a numeric data type. My customer ID I'll also turn into an integer, and then I can remove fields that I don't need. Great. Now that I've cleaned up my data set, the last thing I'll do here in the Select tool is rename a couple fields. The next thing I want to do is create a calculated field. I want to understand what is the spend for each transaction, and I can do this with the Formula tool. The Formula tool allows me to easily apply a formula to one of my existing columns or create a brand new column, which I'll do in this case called spend. And spend is equal to the price multiplied by the quantity. Finally, I'll set the appropriate data type for this new field. Now, this is a very simple expression I've written here, but you can build much more complex expressions using any of the functions that we have available to you. You can build in conditional if-then logic. You can build different string equations, or perhaps you want to use a finance equation. Now, when I run my workflow for the first time, down below in the results window, you can see the new field I just created called spend. Now, let's imagine we'd want to remove these null quantities before calculating this spend field. I can easily go back and drop my data cleansing tool to take care of some of the most common data cleanup tasks, like replacing null values or removing unwanted characters. I could even modify the case. When I run my workflow again, you can see coming out of my data cleansing tool, my null values have been replaced. If I look ahead to the output of my formula tool, you can see this applies forward to that spend field I've calculated. Now, the next thing I need to do is aggregate this data at the customer level, as my goal is to blend this transaction data with the customer table on my database. And you can see down below some of these customer IDs appear in the file multiple times. And that makes sense. It just means they've had multiple transactions with us. So I'm going to bring in a summarize tool to aggregate this data to the customer level. I'll group on my customer ID, since I want my data at that level. I'm then going to sum the spend field to calculate the total spend per customer. And then finally, I'm going to count how many times each customer ID appears in this file. Or in other words, count the total number of transactions per customer. When I run my workflow again, down below you can see my data has now been aggregated to the customer level. And I've calculated the total spend and total number of transactions per customer. This is great. The next thing I'd like to do is blend this data with my customer table. My customer table lives on my SQL database. So I'll now bring in a second input data tool. This time, I'm going to connect to that database. When you're connecting to a database in Alteryx, you can use an ODBC or an OLEDB driver. We also have bulk loaders available for things like Microsoft SQL Server. Once you've made that connection, you can simply select your server here from the list. And now you can choose how you want to stream in your data. You can bring in an entire table, or you can use the Visual Query Builder if you'd prefer not to write a SQL query, but would like to query that data before streaming it into Alteryx. You can easily select the fields you want to bring in and add criteria like where clauses. Or for the SQL savvy, you can simply put your SQL query right here in the SQL editor. For my use case today, I'm going to bring in the entire customer table. And again, we can see a preview of this data. I have my customer ID, the store number they're associated with, as well as information about each customer. Now to blend my two data sets together, I'll bring in a join tool. I'll connect my data sets on either side, and then I will select the field they have in common, which in this case is the customer ID field. Down below, this acts just like the select tool I showed you before, so I can easily clean up my data and rename fields. When I run my workflow, again, my combined data sets are going to come out of this J output. It represents the inner joins. The L and the R, respectively, represent the left and right unjoined. In this case, I would like a right outer join, so I can simply dovetail together my union and my join tool. And now I have quickly blended together two disparate data sources. One of the great things about Alteryx is we're data agnostic. So you can point to flat files, multiple different databases. You can even bring in your data from the cloud. And when you're all done, you have the same options for your output. You can output to a flat file, back to a database, or you can even publish your data straight from Alteryx to Power BI. Now that I've shown you the fundamentals of building your Alteryx workflow, I'm going to turn it back to Trason to show you what he's built in Alteryx and Power BI.
Hi, everybody. So this is one of our bigger workflows. What we have here is a connection to several of our AS400 libraries, as well as our SQL Server instance and a warehouse that we have created. I'll just give you a little example. Most of what's happening here is data blending. We don't have a ton of the predictive or geospatial tools working in this workflow because we are solely trying to tackle the problem of bringing things from a bunch of different sources. So this workflow is kind of the product of a lot of demoing and testing. So what what Amelia has shown you is the key fundamentals into building something like this. So what this does is at the end, what's nice is we can both pull and push. So at the end of this, we push this to another warehouse, and we then pick it up with Power BI, which I'm going to show you right now, to build dashboarding around, in this specific instance, revenue. Now these numbers are anonymized, and there are lots of multipliers going into it, so don't read too much into what you're seeing on the screen. But I am going to really quickly show you how we have pushed this workbook to the services, and anyone within our network can access this. So right here, this is just an example of our landing screen. What we have is a holistic view of revenue across the company for year over year. And then we have a breakdown of our parent teams. I just called them parent team 1 through 5 so that we can see where our revenue is being generated. We have a lot of filtering options over here on the right. We can look at specific weeks. We can look at account managers, which I anonymize these names as well. And then we can look at like a parent customer level. So if we have customers billing different ways, but they all roll up to one customer, we have that hierarchy kind of built out in here. I use this landing page. These are cards, which means that each one of these shows it's a single metric. And I like to use these in this formatting because of the dashboarding options. If people want to build their own dashboard, they can pull single cards instead of like a matrix or a table that would essentially be built out to show the same thing. This is another example of our weekly breakdown. One of the things we really tried to do is to take away questions around date ranges we're looking at, since weeks are weird year over year. Sometimes we just want to make sure we're always comparing the same thing. And so what we've built on here is a tool that allows us to see what date ranges we are looking through. So if we just want to select week 6, it does the breakdown of all of our customers and gives the date range selection for it. But here we also have all the same kind of filters we talked about on the last, where we have a parent team account, an account team, and an account manager. So you can get a view at whatever level of your hierarchy you want to, and it'll give a breakdown of your controlling customer and all of the customers below it, and how they're performing in different business units. So we have, this is an example of one business unit, and then business unit 2, and then a total. And these totals, of course, don't match up to these because we have 7 business units, but for the purposes of the demo, I just used 2. And I'll give you some examples of this working. This is a smaller controlling customer. It looks like we didn't do much for everything or across all business units, but it's just giving an example of how we can really easily just kind of dive into our data if we know names and things of that nature. The other thing we look at is areas of the country. So this is an example of how we break down those areas and how our business units are operating in those areas. We can dive specifically at a market level into volumes and revenues and see where we are falling down year over year or doing really well, so we can put more focus into those two things. So I am going to pass this back over to Miguel, and he is going to talk a little bit more about Power BI. And
thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. I'm Miguel Martinez from Microsoft, and what I wanted to say is, like, it's actually great to see Trey use the tool, because I think that's the best explanation. So let me give you kind of a 30,000 feet overview of the way we define it, but then at the end of the day is how customers use it. So what is Power BI? It's just what we call a modern BI cloud service. That means that it has several components. Trey had to build all of what you've seen, and that's what we define as Power BI Desktop, which is actually free. You can go to powerbi.com and try it out. We see the value of these visualizations and dashboards, the interactive reports, as the collaboration piece. So that's why the authoring part is what you see being basically given to everyone, so everybody can take advantage of it. Second, I like also Trey's work on it because you can see a little bit of Excel similarity. So what I'm trying to say here is that you already know how to use Excel. You're going to see a lot of similarities, especially when it comes to analyzing higher or bigger quantities of data with Power Pivot and Power Query. And then the cloud part is what gives you the what you would say that collaboration piece, which is once you have it, instead of sending a file around, instead of having everyone download a software of a reader, everybody logs into the same web service and they can consume that. That's basically what Power BI is. It covers the whole range of the data journey from the analyst all the way to the data consumer, with some integrations like the one that we're seeing with Alteryx here today, in case you want to do some more advanced, some more programmatic data blending, all the way to mobile apps, to the browser, or to report files themselves. And I think that's it. I assume we'll answer the rest on Q&A. So, Bill, do you want to take it back?
Okay, well, thank you all very much. Let me move us over to this Q&A slide. And thanks, everyone, for that excellent presentation. We'll get started with today's Q&A session, and I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in during the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. So during this QA session, I'll leave up this screen with contact information for all of our speakers if you'd like to contact them following today's webinar. So let's get started. Trayson, I think the audience knows that you probably had the toughest job, and that was about transforming the culture at Knight to be more analytics focused. So would you like to speak a little bit about how you did that, how you got the line of business users to perform their own analytics, and oh yeah, did you have pushback from IT, and how did you deal with that?
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I guess I just want to make it clear that we were already kind of analytics driven. It's just the method in which we were doing that has shifted into a way that kind of puts the ability to answer those questions in the hand of the user. So let's start at the beginning. Yes, initially there was definitely some IT pushback, as there definitely should be. Whenever any new tool comes in, we need to know how it's going to interact with the data. But they found really quickly that as we were able to kind of take that, again, that reporting requirement away from some of the, I guess, more expensive developers, they really quickly saw the value in it. And that went all the way to the top of our IT team. And so now a lot of things get pushed to us rather than IT, and they will come to us with that too. And that's a symbiotic relationship, because we, of course, can't do anything without access, and their cooperation, as well as our cooperation with them and how they have things deployed, and how we are diving into data and how often we're hitting the data sources. All of those things have come up in the past, and we worked together to make sure that we're providing the most efficient solution. So to the next point is that what's been really cool is that we really have been able to, I guess, empower and enable a lot of the users who otherwise were, just using Excel or another sort of legacy tool, and kind of, because they know the business better than anyone in IT, or specifically they know what they do better than anyone else, it's a lot easier for them to kind of dive in with some mentorship and training into their data, and be able to extract information from that data. Does that fully answer the question?
Oh yeah, Trayson, that was great, and there is a follow-up question too, and that is, were the folks that you had to deal with from operations or BI, or were they operating groups, and were your analysts co-located with them? How did you go about getting them to cooperate?
So I will be completely honest, we're not all the way to where we want to be yet. We are still very much, we've been in Alteryx for a little over a year now, in Power BI for about the same amount of time. And there is still a little bit of trying to figure out who does what, whether now that a lot of people have this power, I guess, in their hands, they're wanting to move out of their operational roles and into something where they can help push the business forward into an analyst role. So I would say that's probably been one of our biggest roadblocks recently, because we have a lot of people who have become quite good at what they do, but they can't separate themselves from the business. I hope that fully answers that question.
Oh yeah. And when you set up your teams, who all did you involve? Was it data modelers, or the BI folks, or data scientists, or operating guys, or who?
Yeah, so usually how we how we started it was we took the people who are kind of already doing the reporting, though it's, again, through an SSRS or AS400 report and mashing it in Excel. We took those people who already knew how the data was supposed to look and the output, and we were taking these processes that took hours and sometimes days to put together once a month, once a quarter, once a year, whatever your situation is, and we were able to kind of accelerate that. And so since they best know what's going on in the data, or as it's pushed to them, they were the obvious candidate to kind of push into this role. And all of them were very excited about it. Not everyone was, but the ones that we gave the power to and have really grabbed it, you can see how they have been able to transform their particular business units in the way that they look at metrics.
Well, sounds like a terrifically successful project, and I understand it's still underway, but sounds like you're doing very well. We've had a lot of questions have come in that are fundamentally technical in nature, so let me just run down a list of these for our Alteryx and Microsoft participants. Starts with, can the workflow be scheduled and automated to run in Alteryx? And if so, does that automatically update the Power BI dashboard?
That's a great question. Go ahead, Dan. Workflows in Alteryx.
This is Dan. So you can definitely schedule and automate workflows in Alteryx and then push the data into Power BI. As far as Power BI, though, let me have Miguel, who's the Power BI guy, answer that question in terms of data refresh.
Yeah, I was going to say it all depends on, sorry, Miguel here. It all depends on how you implement the solution. So Power BI, on the specific case of Alteryx, that's basically a push update. So the moment you run the flow in Alteryx, that data gets pushed into Power BI, and that update gets reflected on the visualization automatically. When I said depending on how you connect to it, actually Power BI is, I don't want to say the only one, but one of the few data visualization tools through the service that allows you to visualize real-time data. So again, depending on how you implement your Alteryx or any other data source solution, in this case it would be either through the APIs or through the other implementations that we have with, let's say, tools like PubNub or basically anything that can handle streaming data, you can get refresh rates to the second if you want to. In the particular case of Alteryx, I would say the closest one that can be is definitely automatic. So the moment you push the flow, the data gets updated. But you can get as close as to real time if you implement a solution like a queue that gets updated, let's say, as frequently as you want, and then you connect through direct query from Power BI to that data source. Again, I would say I don't want to say the solutions are like endless or you have like tons of options, but it all depends on how you set up the flow, the data flow, for that data to be refreshed.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. It was very complete. You know, there are a variety of questions here dealing with types of data that you can blend together and sources. So let me deal briefly with the source questions, because we know that while a lot of this data is internal to our organization, that some of it comes from outside providers, and some of those folks have policies that prevent us from rehosting that external data in our data warehouses. Is that a barrier to using Alteryx and Power BI? I think maybe you might be on mute.
No. I was waiting to see if either Dan or Emily wanted to answer. I think it's also a two-part solution. So even though we have the integration, both tools give you a lot of flexibility on what data you tap into and what you do with it. To give you an example, like another example like the one I gave you before, let's say you're using Alteryx to tap into a SQL Server data warehouse that does something with the data. Let's say you run some R scripts to do some advanced analytics, maybe some predictive. You send that back to SQL. and let's say let me come up with like a very, very different type of data source, like a real-time sensor that you have on one of your of the machines that your company runs. And maybe you are blending that in real time or on the fly with the data that's coming from that Alteryx flow. So what I'm trying to say here is that both tools give you the flexibility to bring data directly from the source, do some modification, cleaning, actual calculations on top of that data, and then since what I'm assuming the person asking this question is the final visualization, that's definitely Power BI will give you the flexibility to visualize that. It all depends on how much you want to intertwine these data flows and these data sources. But I would say from either Alteryx or Power BI, there are no limitations on the data you can bring in. It's more about how much you want to work them together before and represent that in a visual way within Power BI after the output is basically sent to the particular service. I don't know if you guys want to comment a little bit more on the Alteryx side.
No, that's absolutely right, Miguel. In Alteryx, there's no limit to the size or amount of data sources that you have in a single workflow. And when you press that run button, it's going to stream in the most up-to-date from the various sources that you've connected from. And then you can use that data in whatever transformations you have outlined in your workflow process.
Well, thank you both for that answer. And Miguel, while we're on this topic, and also Dan and Amelia, I guess I was under the impression that Power BI had some ability to do transformation and blending. What is the benefit of teaming that with Alteryx for more blending?
Ooh,
Absolutely.
That's a tricky one. Go ahead and maybe I can give you the Power BI view on it, but I think it's very straightforward too, and it should be the same one. So I think it's a good test of a question if we answer separately.
Great. Well, one of the nice things about Alteryx is our data engine is powerful and efficient in processing and blending your various data sources. And then when you push it to Power BI, your finalized data set, it's going to make your visualizations fast and easy to develop. And Miguel, if you have anything to add there.
Exactly. That's where I was going. It almost seems like we prepared this, but we can show you guys we did not. So the color that I want to add here, yeah, definitely you have on any data visualization tool, and you can, like, if anybody's using, actually, if we look at the poll answer, a lot of people are using SAS, Tableau. Every single data visualization tool will have some sort of data preparation, data blending capabilities. It's more about the solution that you want to implement, and I think that's the where Alteryx comes in and helps out not only with ease of use, but I want to say the advanced features and the automation that you can accomplish. Having said that, it doesn't mean that, again, Power BI does not allow you to do that. It's more about the solution that you're looking for and how easy that particular solution can be. And again, like the reason why we connect to Alteryx is basically twofold. One is a lot of people see the value, a lot of customers see the value, like for example, Trey in this case, of the advantages of that advanced flow that Alteryx can provide. But at the same time, like you need that outlet for data visualization, and that's where Power BI comes in, and that's why we see a lot of value into this integration. So to answer, like to try to summarize, I think from both sides is it depends on the particular flow that you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to get out of your data, if one or the other will give you the data blending capabilities that you need.
Terrific. Well, thank you for that clarification. We've had some questions come in about types of data that can be blended. There's a specific question here about, gee, can I blend DB2 and Hadoop, for example? But maybe this is an opportunity to talk more broadly about if there are, in fact, any limits on the types of data that Alteryx can blend.
That's a great question. As I mentioned before, there's no size or number of source limit on the sources that you can blend in Alteryx, and there is a plethora of data sources that we support, including many Hadoop varieties, and you can see the complete list at www.alteryx.com/tech specs.
Okay. All right. Well, that should take care of that. And thank you for that answer.
Bill,
sure.
Can I add a little bit about Power BI? Just because there is a limitation with Power BI. Yeah, no problem. As I mentioned before, Power BI it is a cloud service. So, just trying to simplify this as much as I can. You have the option of uploading the data to the cloud, which basically means that you come up with a data model, which could be the output of Alteryx, let's say, and that gets hosted on the Microsoft Cloud in Azure. That model, that unique model, has a limit of 1 gigabyte per model, and that's what I mentioned, especially previously, the other options that you have. So in the case that Trey showed, they're actually sending the data back to a SQL, and Trey, please, to be honest here, this is what I remember from the solution when you showed it to us, back to a SQL data warehouse or cube that doesn't have any limitations, and depending on how you want to publish to Power BI, you can literally upload the whole model, or you can tap into it directly. That's the case, of course, like the enterprise solution case that doesn't have any size restrictions the same way it does with Alteryx. So as you send data through the flow with Alteryx, there are no limitations there. If you make the decision to upload to the cloud, you have that 1 gigabyte limitation. If you decide to connect directly live to that data source, like the hardware will be your limitation, so to speaking. Like if you have the hardware that can support like something as big as the solution that you want to implement, you should be fine.
Well, Miguel, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that additional clarification. Now,
sorry for the interruption.
Yeah. Oh, not at all. Not at all. I am particularly fond of the visual drag and drop framework as a way to be very clear amongst collaborators exactly what's getting blended. And we have a couple of questions from the audience that come at this from two angles. First of all, if you have a disagreement about, say, the order in which data should be blended, or even the types or the method in which it should be blended, is it possible to create versions of this workflow and then to control for versions? And the second part of the question is maybe for Trayson. Trayson, that was a very complex-looking workflow you showed us. How do you handle security so that folks don't arbitrarily change that?
Great. Now, for the first part of your question, Dan, in regards to multiple versions, if there's differing viewpoints, the Alteryx Analytics Gallery allows you to easily maintain version control and maintain a complete history of all the different versions, authors, and includes their comments as well. So you can select which version you want to be the source of truth, if you will, but also maintain existing copies of the previous versions of the workflow.
Okay.
Yes, and I'll jump on to what Amelia said from there. Currently, the way we implement it is that we have a single publisher at the moment because we aren't, again, to the level where we have hundreds of people using this. We just have probably about 12 to 15. Anytime that a workflow needs to be updated or tested, we always push it through one person that uses a service account. And that way we can have a view of everything that goes in and out of our gallery, everything that's scheduled. It's all in one spot.
Okay, and Dan, while you're on that topic and before Trayson weighs in, did I understand that there is a specific security and governance mechanism built into Alteryx?
You did understand that correctly. The Alteryx Analytics Gallery, a piece of the Alteryx server, allows you to easily have that analytic governance that so many companies are working for, whether it be maintaining different versions or having an audit of who's accessed what workflow and when, and giving them a very easy way to share and distribute workflows and manage who has access to each workflow right there in a easy-to-use web interface.
Terrific. And now maybe back to Trayson to comment on how he actually goes about dealing with this in his real-world day-to-day life.
Yeah, sorry. So that the last comment was me. We do all of our I'll just step back onto it. We do all of our publication through a single service account. So any live versions of any workflows all go through there so that we have currently a single publisher pushing this stuff out. Now everyone has access to that warehouse that we've kind of created to push, not everyone, but everyone that is currently developing in Power BI on my team has access to that warehouse. So once we've tested and demoed the workflow to make sure, one, the data that's coming out of it is accurate, and two, that it's not putting too much strain on any of our other processes, being the servers that they're on or the operational tools that they're hitting. Once all of that has kind of been tested and made sure that it is it's working the best way it can, we push that all through a single source. And back to Amelia's point, we have in the past seen where a newer version did not in fact line up with the way the data should look, and we have gone to previous versions and started back at that point.
Yep, good. And Trayson, while we've got you here, it appeared that there were significant benefits in the way the data was presented and perhaps revealed new insights. But were there other savings? Were there time savings or labor savings in implementing this way?
Oh, 100%. The visual that I showed you has kind of done two things. One, when looking at performance, it used to take, we're talking 80 to 90 man hours a week just on the teams, that specific account management team, just trying to get insights into what their customers are doing. So that's one of our first savings. The second savings is that we now are able to look at our information in ways we didn't know were possible in the past or we hadn't thought about. And that's what's been so much fun about this whole process is that as we're sitting down and talking to the groups about what they want to see, we can usually offer insights and like, okay, so you've always looked at it with A, B, and C, but what if we were able to offer you D or E or F or all these new data points into the same spot? And usually that gets people really excited around what we're doing and how we can kind of transform the way they do things.
Oh, that's a terrific insight, and thanks for that in-depth comment. Well, Trayson, Miguel, Amelia, Dan, hey, thank you all for great answers to some very good questions. And for those of you that asked questions that weren't answered today, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to our presenters and the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendar for March 22nd, that's tomorrow. And that's our next DSC webinar, which is On-Demand Data Fusion for Single or Cross-Domain Visualizations to be presented by Semantic Research. Also remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. So this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship and our speakers today, Miguel Martinez, Trayson Marks, Amelia Glum, and Dan Gananchel, for their insight into today's topic. So my name is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow, March 22nd. Have a great day.